Hello everybody and welcome to the Arsenal Ramble, where today we're going to be reconciling over the 4-1 defeat against Manchester City on Wednesday evening. It's not nice having to come onto the podcast for the fourth time in a row and be speaking about a negative result, but to help me do that and to carry this therapy session with me is my co-rambler Dave. Dave, how are you doing? You okay?
I'll try to help you, but I don't know how helpful I will be, to be honest, because I'm in pain, to be honest. No, it's not pain. It's more disappointment. The pain was the Southampton game and the West Ham game, wasn't it? That was the pain. This was sort of the final nail in the coffin, if you will. So yeah, I do feel massively disappointed and massively deflated, like the whole fan base. Yeah.
So I completely agree with you there, and I think that's something which is really important to remember, is the fact that I think this is the final nail in the coffin after that run, because what we needed to be able to maintain was that buffer. That's what we all spoke about, is the fact that we need to be able to beat Southampton, beat West Ham. If we could have beaten Liverpool at Anfield, that would have been great, but no one was really expecting us to do that. But had we have won those two matches, we would have had that extra 4 points in the bag, so to speak. And then you're talking, we lose to Man City, and then it's only like we're still 1 point ahead of them technically, if they still win all their games and we still win all of ours. So it would have been an allowance almost to be able to take that free hit to try and beat Man City or try and not lose, etc. But I think if we're not kidding ourselves, everybody was kind of expecting us to, well, not to perform too great in this game. Man City, they've been rolling teams left, right and centre in the Champions League. You know, they put 5 past Bayern Munich and just breezed past them with ease. So it's not like we're miles away from this Man City squad. But the way that we could have been able to achieve this title is by winning all of the other games and having that buffer. But it's just a bit frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's any harsh truth that we're second best to this Man City team. We're coming up against an entire state at the end of the day. It's always going to be tough to match that firepower. Just the disappointing thing was we couldn't at least give them a good game. You know, we've sort of come away from this with our tails between our legs. Like, it was men v boys, really, wasn't it? And I don't say that lightly. So I think that for me is the most disappointing thing, that we just couldn't match their intensity. We couldn't rise to the occasion. And to be honest, it's not the first time that we've failed to do that. You know, you looked at the previous season in the Tottenham game and the Newcastle game, and in those games we had sort of little excuses of, we've got a lot of injuries, we've got Cedric playing, we've got Holding playing. In this game, we had our best 11. Bar Saliba and Holding, you know, that little switch there. So we've got 10 of our normal players out there, and you know, we can't blame it on just one player swap. To be honest, we just didn't rise to the occasion. That for me is really disappointing.
Yeah, I think it's a multitude of different things and different reasons as to why we didn't perform in this game. I do think that the Rob Holding Saliba thing was quite a big part in it, to be honest. Just because we're going to speak about it, but Rob Holding didn't really cover himself in too much glory during that game. But you know, when we're trying to play out from the back and we're trying to pass it through the midfield, our other experienced players, Thomas Partey's not playing well, Xhaka's not playing well. We're just not making the ball tick. Odegaard's losing the ball. Saka and Martinelli, they're not having many one-on-ones, and didn't see much of Jesus at all. Really, didn't start to create anything. So that's also frustrating. So yeah, I think. So that's part and parcel of it, the Rob Holding thing. But what I'd also like to add is the fact that when you play a team like Man City, I think you've got to be a bit wise to the way they set up, and you have to counteract it in a different way. Now, I know we should always try and, stamp our authority and try and play the way that we like to play against teams. But I think against this Man City, it's just different. You've just got to play different against this Man City team. I think if we're going to try and play out from the back and be a high pressure team and try and play through them, they're just better than us at it. They're just a much more talented, more experienced squad at doing the things that we want to do. So we're going to get punished, and ultimately we did. I think you've just got to try and change the whole sort of system. You know, go for a counter-attacking games, because that's how teams like Manchester United and teams like Tottenham have been a thorn in Manchester City's sides for the last couple of seasons, because even though they've really underperformed against other teams, they seem to turn up against Manchester City because they have this counter-attacking, you know, the likes of Son and Kane always scoring and Rashford scoring, albeit that goal should have been disallowed in the game that they played, the dodgy offside rule. But I do think that we might have been a bit naive in that aspect. Maybe we could have sat back a lot more, had a couple of banks defending and then having Martinelli and Saka countering. But yeah, I feel like we went for the wrong decision there. What do you reckon to that? Do you think we should have gone for a different kind of game plan, or...?
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think it's almost like Arteta's trying to second guess what Pep's thinking and what's Arteta going to do. They're playing 5D chess, you know. I think it's a tough one, because I think whatever he does, we lose this game, he's wrong, you know. It's a tough one. The big one for me is Trossard. You know, Trossard has been immense since coming into this team in January, and if you look to the last 4 games where we've not played well, it's when Trossard's not been starting. You know, so for me that's one part of it. The obvious one is Rob Holding. We've talked about it millions of times, but is there a way we can play this 11 without Rob Holding? And it's tough. A lot of people have mentioned maybe putting Tierney at left back, swapping Zinchenko out on the right. I know he's not, you know, notorious for playing in that position, but he operates in midfield anyway, so it's something that he could potentially do. And then putting Ben White as a right centre back, that is an option that I've seen Arsenal fans ponder and wish that we had done. But like I say, it's a really tough one. But to go with the same team that's been, you know, drawn the last 3 games, doesn't fill you with confidence, does it, right off the back?
No, and to be honest, if you're going to start swapping the actual team out like that, two of the biggest reasons why we've been successful this season is Zinchenko on the left, stepping into that midfield and creating chances, and then Ben White on the right being able to dovetail with Saka because they've got such a good relationship on that side. So if we were to then pretty much take out the whole White thing down the right, Zinchenko goes to the right, but then he's going to step in midfield, and you're not going to see overlapping runs on the right-hand side with Zinchenko and Saka, are you? Because it's just he's not that sort of player. So Zinchenko would be mirroring too much of what Odegaard brings in that kind of area, and it's not really going to work. So ultimately, I think he did go with the right decision on the team that he had available to him. Unfortunately, Saliba was just injured, wasn't he? So he couldn't play. But I think if you're going to have 10 out of your 11 starting 11 on the pitch, but it's just so unfortunate that Rob Holding, his quality is so below what we need in this kind of title race, isn't it? You can't have a player of his ability or inability in certain situations to come in as a substitute, because I don't like to be too disrespectful to players and be too negative on their performances, but he has been bad. He has been pretty poor, to be honest, and I think he wasn't that awful in the games prior to this game. Maybe as regards to building up from the back and his passing and his availability to be able to start something to actually start an attack. But in this game, it was his whole game. His defensive awareness, his positioning was dreadful in this game. He was not where he needs to be in the majority of instances where Man City were having counter attacks. I think we should probably mention the first goal as we're on the topic of Rob Holding. So it's one floated ball that's going to around the centre circle, and Holding's pushed all the way up, and he's on to Erling Haaland, who, if you're going to get that close to Erling Haaland, you can't make it so easy for him to just bring the ball down in the way that he does. He literally manages. To be fair to Haaland, it's a great touch. He makes a really good touch, but he literally just cushions the ball, feeling like he's not even being pressured from behind, and then plays De Bruyne through. And then once De Bruyne is through, Holding's completely out of position. And this next part isn't Holding's fault. You've got 2 or 3 Arsenal players around De Bruyne, and no one really goes in to make a challenge. Everyone's just so frightened of making a challenge, and they back off, and he keeps going. And then he has a shot from outside the box, which, to be fair, I do think Ramsdale maybe could have done a little bit better with. It might be a bit harsh of me saying, because it starts outside the post and ends up just bending in. But yeah, I think that was really poor all round defensively from Arsenal. Poor from Holding, poor from the midfield to not be able to see the run from De Bruyne and backing off, and then Ramsdale as well at the end. What do you reckon to that, mate?
I don't think you're harsh at all with Ramsdale. I think that is a save that he should make. It's a side-footed finish at the end of the day. Like, yeah, it was powerful. I get it, but a good 10 keepers in the league saved that. So, yeah, for me, he's got to be saving that. But for it to be in that position in the first place is horrendous. The tracking by Partey for the goal was just, it was horrendous. And there's no other way to describe it, to be honest. He had an absolute nightmare of a game. He didn't know when to go, and the same with Holding, like you said. He just goes every time. He doesn't even pick and choose the right moments. He just goes full red alert, trying to win every single ball out of position. The minute he does that, there's all that space in behind that De Bruyne just exploited all game. Just basic again, like we said it in the last podcast, just basic. And for as brilliant as Man City were in this game, and don't get me wrong, they were brilliant. They could have scored 5 in that first half, but a lot of the goals that they actually did score in this game were handed to them on a plate again. Yeah,
I completely agree. They definitely could have created and scored by their own account, sort of thing. But the goals that they actually did manage to score were pretty much poor defending and bad mistakes from us, weren't they? And that's something which has been familiar in the last few games. We've been giving away silly, sloppy chances and conceding and getting punished for it. So if you want to be winning titles, then you can't do that. And I understand this is the youngest team in the Premier League, or joint youngest team in the Premier League with Southampton, of an average age of 24, I think it is. But you've got to hope that this is going to come with time. It's going to come with more experience, but you just can't expect to actually win and go on and get titles and go on to do well in the Champions League if your players are going to make these silly mistakes, are you?
No. It was just a really poor half. When you think of the away games at Liverpool, Spurs, Chelsea, and even United, Arsenal started really, really well, and we played the football that we wanted to play. City just didn't let us do that yesterday. Well, the day before. God, I can't get my days right here. It was just one-way traffic. We couldn't play our game.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Man City, is they just kind of strangulate you, don't they? They don't allow you to be able to create your to be able to play your own game, and that is why I mentioned earlier that we should have gone with a different game plan to be able to actually harm and hurt this Man City team. But yeah, it is deflating, and it does really feel like that was our opportunity to be able to put the title back into our hands and be able to, all of the doubters we've had over the last few weeks, and then we've stomped our authority back on the Premier League, and now it's back in our hands. But no, I think we were living in dreamland a little bit before the game. And it's not to say that we're not going to win the Premier League now, because yes, Man City have got 2 games in hand and they could technically be 4 points ahead of us. But as we all know, games in hand don't actually mean anything until you got the points on the board. So, 2 games ago we had 1 less point. So that just shows you that in 2 games you could only get 1 point if you don't perform well. But as we've seen, Man City, they've been absolutely storming the league, especially in the last 10 games. They've just rolled teams over, which is scary. Haaland, he's unreal. Even the last goal he scored today, he did it with his hair down. He just let his hair down. It's like, yeah, Arsenal, they're not posing much of a threat to me. I can do what I want. And it just seemed like he was taking the mick, didn't he, at that point where, the hair was down. It almost seemed like he couldn't be bothered to score, but it's like, I may as well tap it in, But it's not what you want to see from the team, is it? It's not what you want to see from the boys. You want to see a bit of desire, a bit of heart. But no, there was nothing of that, was there?
Yeah, that was the little thing I was clinging on to as well. The fact that Ramsdale managed to keep Haaland quiet, or not quiet, because obviously he saved a lot of efforts from him, but managed to keep him out from scoring. And for him to score with virtually one of the last kicks of the game, it's like, for God's sake, especially after he got his locks out. So it was just irritating, to be honest. But yeah, they do seem to have picked up form right at the right time for them and right at the wrong time for us, and it's vice versa for us. So it's just really not gone hand in hand, to be honest. And but like you say, you've got to have hope as a fan, haven't you? That maybe there's still some twists and turns in these final 5 games for us and 7 for them. Because when we lost to them last time in the reverse fixture at the Emirates, it was a little bit doom and gloom for a week, and then they go and draw to Notts Forest, and it's like, oh, we're back. I think we were back 5 points ahead of them, something like that at that point. So it was like just 1 week later, it was almost forgotten about the loss at the Emirates. So that's how quickly things can change. And I don't want. It might not work out that way, but we have to hope, and we have to now go into these final 5 games and try our best to pick up maximum points, because it could go that way. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. We need to make sure we keep our hat in the ring, just in case Man City do end up dropping points, so then we're there to pounce and be able to take that opportunity, like they have done to us in these last few weeks. Because before the last 3 games before the City game, they were nowhere really near us, were they? And if they had dropped a couple of points here and there, then we would have been absolutely clear and dry. But yeah, it just shows you the difference between a really professional team that have been together for quite a few years, and they've injected that 100 million, the Erling Haaland and all of the quality of players that they've got. It's a disgusting wealth of players. I saw a quote earlier of it was Manchester City's first 11 would win the Premier League. Manchester City's second 11 would at least get top 4. So, in a 22-man squad, that's what they would achieve. And then Arsenal's first 11 would at least challenge for the Premier League. Arsenal's second 11 wouldn't even get top half. If you're talking all of our second string players, they would not get top half. That just shows you the night and day of the squad depth in both the Arsenal and the Manchester City teams. And I know they're playing on all fronts. They've got all the different competitions that they're playing in, but they've got the squad depth to be able to deal with that. So we can't really use that excuse, as we got knocked out of all of the other cups. And it's starting to dawn on me that this might have been our only opportunity for a while to be able to actually win the Premier League. And this isn't me being too negative, but it seemed like the perfect storm. We're ahead of Manchester City. We've got an 8-point gap at the time. So we're talking 8-point gap. We've gone out of all the other cup competitions. We can just focus on the Premier League. We've got a few decent January transfers. So we've got the likes of Trossard that came in, and Jorginho to be a good player in the absence of Partey, who has been a big injury issue over the last couple of seasons. And there weren't teams other than Manchester City that were really good at challenges for the title. There's a hint of Manchester United, but they fell off. But it just seems like over the next few seasons we're going to be in the Champions League as well, and hopefully we go far in that competition. But then you've got the likes of Newcastle, who are going to be coming back. Liverpool, they're going to be coming back. Obviously Manchester City as well. Man United, they're starting to build on something as well. Forget Spurs, they're done and dusted. They'll be getting relegated next season. But it just seemed like this really was our opportunity to be able to really go for it, and it just really adds to the disappointment that I'm feeling at the minute.
It was a great opportunity. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think it's our only opportunity. This isn't like Leicester, for example. This isn't like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get the title. I'm really looking forward to the summer, because now we're in a position where we've secured Champions League football. There's a silver lining for everybody. That's mathematical now. We have got top four. We cannot not get Champions League football. So that's a nice one. So we're guaranteed that, which comes with a lot more financial power and also the ability to attract better players. So those two combinations alone will allow us to hopefully build on that squad and hopefully build that strength in depth, because I would say that has improved this season from what we're used to. But yeah, you're dead right. We're still miles off having a team, a second team, if you will, that's anywhere near the strength of City's. And that is really how they're able to challenge in all of these competitions without really dropping many points. So it will be really interesting in the summer to see the sort of players we can acquire, and I'm looking at that midfield especially. I think that really does need a bit of invigoration, if you will, and also up top, to be honest, because this game is a perfect example of how Eddie Nketiah does not provide much from the bench, to be honest. And he doesn't start over Jesus. So where does that leave you? Not in a very good position, to be honest. So I really hope that we can go out and get a big number 9 that's got something about him. I don't just want a Weghorst, someone that can just lump balls to. I want someone a bit like what City have now gone to with Haaland, like a dynamic, tall, pacey forward that can we were trying to string 16, 17, 18 passes together just to get it in their final third. They can do 2 or 3, and they're in our final third attacking us. So mathematically, it makes a lot of sense at times. And to have that option, it would be great. And to go alongside the fact that Jesus just isn't scoring goals. And, I've defended Jesus a lot on that front because of what else he provides this team. But we haven't seen that since he returned from injury, to be honest. We've seen it in glimpses, but he's not really being much of a threat. I know he scored a couple of goals here and there since he's come back, but in this game, he might as well not have been there, to be honest. He didn't do anything. It was one of his worst games. And a lot of fans were calling for Trossard pre-game to replace Jesus as the false 9. And I could see what they were saying. But I was thinking, Jesus against his old club, back at the Etihad, he's going to have a point to prove. He's going to be all over him. He's going to be like a dog on E. No, it couldn't have been. It couldn't have been any more the opposite. Same with Zinchenko. It looked like they'd given up in the first half. It was just leaderless. I don't know. For me, I'd love to be able to have Jesus and a big 9, and then we've got the prospect of using Jesus on the right if we need to as well, which is an area where we haven't really got another player apart from Saka. that can challenge Saka for his position. So that does open that sort of dimension as well. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because before we actually got Jesus, we were looking at that kind of model of player, weren't we? We were looking at Vlahovic in the January transfer window that preceded the window that we got Jesus in. Now, I think Vlahovic he's almost kind of like the wish version of Haaland, isn't he? He's a big, tall, quite quick, technical forward who would be able to be physical in the box as well. But yeah, it's just so tricky to be able to have top quality players that are happy that their minutes are going to be shared, because a lot of players, they want to know that they're going to be a starter. They want to know that they're going to get at least 30 out of 38 games in a season in the Premier League, which if you're playing for Man City, you're not going to get. Which is why Man City works so well, because all of the players that go there, they know that they're not going to play. They're not going to play all their games. Every Manchester City player, maybe apart from Haaland, knows that, or De Bruyne as well. They know that their minutes are going to be shared. But to be able to win titles, you need to be able to have a big catalogue of players and squad depth to be able to share those minutes. But to be able to have a big catalogue of players that are going to share those minutes, you need to be trying to win titles, because that's what keeps them interested. So it's catch-22 really, isn't it? You can't have one without the other. So maybe when we get into that upper echelon of the Premier League and we become more dominant, players will be happy to just be part of the group rather than be a guaranteed starting player sort of thing. So that will be interesting to see if we manage to integrate some players like that. Maybe get someone that is like Vlahovic, or maybe even like an Osimhen, or someone like that who's physical but quick, that can be a fox in the box. But yeah, Nketiah, he's been a good deputy for when Jesus wasn't in, when he first came in. Dropped off a little bit, and then he's just been unreliable since, hasn't he? He's not really posed a threat at all. In fact, I think I would much rather have Trossard in that position than Nketiah. So we've got a lot of things to do in the summer, but it just shows you how defeatist we are, that we're already talking like we've completely lost the league, but we're sat top of the pile, albeit with a couple of games played more than Manchester City, and there's a lot of things that could still go on between then and the end of the season. Man City, they've still got to play Brighton away, they've still got to play Brentford, they've got to play Chelsea, which I know they've been pretty rubbish this season, but it doesn't guarantee that they're going to beat them. And they're playing some teams that are scrapping for their lives at the bottom of the table. Now, it's easy to say, well, Man City should roll over Leeds. Leeds have been rubbish this season, but look at what happened to us against Southampton. They've been woeful this season, but Southampton were scrapping for their lives. So there's going to be a lot of more twists and turns. I don't think that both of these teams are going to get wins all the way to the end of the season. So fingers crossed it falls in our favour. But yeah, at the minute, it does feel kind of like we're not going to do it, though, doesn't it?
It does. But I think now the pressure's off a little bit, we might see a different Arsenal. Because I do think that's played into it massively. But we'll see in this next game against Chelsea, because they're playing awful at the minute. They're at relegation form. Frank Lampard's back at the wheel. We should be steamrolling them at the Emirates, making Mudryk regret his decision to go to Stamford Bridge. It could be a good game to really stamp that sort of, that, not authority, but you know what I mean. Just like sort of kind of brush aside what's happened and just try and finish this final stretch of the season on good form. The Newcastle game, that is going to be tricky, because they are playing very, very good football at the minute and very solid at the back. And we're away. It's going to be a tough game, that, no doubt about it. There's going to be twists and turns.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm getting flashbacks to last season when we played Newcastle away and how that went down. But yeah, that's one thing that we actually said about Newcastle is they're a really good team defensively, but they don't score many goals. But then in the last 5 or 6 games, they've just been absolutely ruthless, haven't they? They've been scoring goals left, right, and centre. So I think if we're not on our game that game, then, well, we can just kiss it goodbye. I think if we'd get ripped apart by Newcastle if we're not on it, if we're not the team that we have been for the majority of this season. So I do think it's a time for us to reconcile, to go back to the drawing board, get on the training ground and just go back to basics and just say, look, we know each other's jobs. We know what we need to do. Maybe have some sort of extra protection for Rob Holding and just say to him, look, mate, you don't have to go and challenge for every single ball because you've not got the pace to be able to recover back. Maybe let Gabriel go for that and you can cover him or whatever. But I just think we need to just go back to square one and really go for it now, because everybody's written us off now. Everybody's saying Arsenal, they're written off, they're done, they're finished. If you're written off, then you've got no pressure and you shouldn't have any pressure to perform now. We should be able to just keep trucking away, getting 3 points, and then, yeah, as I said before, if we're in position where we might be able to pounce in the last couple of games, then that to me is a fantastic season to be going, neck and neck with this Man City Goliath of a team. We've got this young squad of talent that's just bursting onto the scene, and we've gone toe to toe with Manchester City, and we're 28th of April, so we're almost in May, and we're still technically top of the pile, but we might be behind them in a couple of games' time. But that's incredible to see the improvement that we've gone over the last season or so, that we're finishing 8th and then 8th and then 5th, and then now we're challenging for a title. And Mikel Arteta had this 5-year plan, and it seems like we're already in the final stage of that before the 5th year. So that's really, really good and really encouraging to see. I know it's a bit of a meme for me to be saying that for us to get back into the Champions League was the objective at the start of the season, and it was. Let's not lie, that was the initial objective. Yes, the goalposts moved because we got ourselves into a great position to be able to win the title, which does look less and less likely now, but we've really gone for it. We've really tried it. We've really tried to go for it. I do think the Southampton and the West Ham, and I'd also like to add the Everton away game that we managed to lose, that those are probably the 3 defining games where we've dropped points where we absolutely shouldn't have dropped points. I'd say I could understand all the other games, Manchester City, Liverpool, Man United, even though we got robbed of the Martinelli goal, but that's a game that you can lose. But yeah, the Everton away and the Southampton West Ham, I just think they're inexcusable dropping of points, and ultimately if we end up losing by less than 3 or 4 points, then that's where we went wrong.
Yeah, you did right. Like that was the target, and yeah, there was a lot of memes. Like, that's what all the excuses are now for Arsenal fans. But that is a fact. We're in phase 3, as Arteta calls it, with another 2 phases to come, and you can't progress the next phase without Champions League football because of what we've already talked about. So yeah, we've achieved that, and achieved it well. We've overachieved to a degree. We had to move the goalposts because of where we were. If we fall short, then fair enough. We'll go again next year. Like I said earlier, this isn't a Leicester where it's a flash in the pan. All our players are going to get nabbed from us, because that is very unlikely. I suppose the only player that we're at risk of losing in terms of contract situation is Saliba at the minute. I know Saka is yet to have signed his, but I think that's just a matter of time, to be honest. Saliba's in his final year come the summer, so we could be in a situation where we have to tie him down or maybe sell him. But hopefully we've shown him enough that this is a team that can be challenging in the best league in the world, and we can reward him with a new contract that he deserves. But apart from that, I think we've built up a brilliant young team that's only going to develop and get better. We just need to add them final pieces to the puzzle, if you will, to take us to that next phase.
Does that worry you, though, the fact that Saliba could potentially leave? Because we've seen in the last few games how important Saliba is in his absence. The fact that we've really underperformed, and especially we've been weak in that area of the pitch. So do you think if Saliba was to leave, then this phase of the plan is kind of going into a backward step almost, because who are we then going to get in who's going to be able to step up and be as good as Saliba? I don't think there's that many players that are cheap enough on the market that would be able to fill Saliba's shoes. And as we've seen, we really do struggle when he's not in the team. So do you think that is an absolutely essential thing for Arsenal to do, to get his pen on the paper? Or
Definitely, yeah. He's one of the best centre-backs in the league, and he's 21, I think. So, he's the future for this team. It would be a massive disappointment if we were to lose him. So, yeah, it's crucial. Him, Martinelli and Saka are always the crucial three to tie down. And then we've got to think about the next wave of players that are probably deserving of new contracts, like Ramsdale and Odegaard potentially, so yeah, at least they're spread out a little bit. It's not all like one big. We've got to pay everyone Champions League wages now in one big go, because that could then just nullify all the Champions League money, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, it's crucial. If we were to lose him, to replace him, it would be incredibly difficult, wouldn't it? Like you say, to find someone of that caliber. And then comes the price tag if they're known. You'd have to do a Brighton and find some absolute randomer in the middle of nowhere that can step in and match Saliba's boots, but that just seems like a pipe dream, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And so do you think Rob Holding, after this season, do you think it's going to be his last season in an Arsenal shirt? Because I can't really see him in the future plans for this team. I know he's made some good appearances, especially last season, to be able to see out games. Maybe that's his speciality, but he's just not really good enough for this level of team, is he?
No, I don't know. I don't know who we could sell him to, though, because I don't think he's really very attractive to sign, is he? At the minute, he doesn't suit our team at all. He's a Sean Dyche centre-back, isn't he? He needs to be playing for a team like that, to be honest, not for a team like Arsenal. Yeah, I don't know how long he's got left on his contract, to be honest, so it's difficult to answer. But I don't think he really would have played much this season had we not have had the injuries we've had to Tomiyasu and Saliba. To have them both out at the same time. We even got them. They both got injured in that same Sporting Lisbon game that we bloody lost anyway. It's just so frustrating. That's really annoying, isn't it? Like a game that we lost, we could have thrown away. We threw away the Europa League and the Premier League in one half. It's like God's sake. But yeah, Tomiyasu would have allowed us to shift Ben White to centre back, play Tomiyasu at right back, or vice versa. We know Tomiyasu play pretty well at centre back. There's these options there that we could have used. I don't think Rob Holding really would have thought he'd ever even have minutes in this season. It's just been very unfortunate to have them both out at the same time. So yeah. I probably will. I imagine that he'll stick around till the end of his contract and then leave on a free whenever that will be, because I can't imagine many teams coming in for him for any significant amount of money.
That's crazy, isn't it? When you think about it, how we actually did just lose both of our really decent players. Tomiyasu, he's more than capable to be a first team player when Ben White might get shifted to centre back, and obviously Saliba as well. In that one game in the Europa League, which we ended up losing anyway, it just baffles me in the fact that could be the defining moment of us actually not winning this Premier League. And almost strikes me as, why did we not play Rob Holding in that game instead of having him play for the last 12 games of the Premier League? Baffles me. It's crazy. You know, the Europa League, it shouldn't be a priority. We're not going to... There's nothing that we can get from the Europa League apart from a bit of silverware, which is second-tier European football silverware. We would have already got Champions League qualifications. We've already got it now. We don't need to qualify for the Champions League through the Europa League. So why we risked all of those players in that game? It's just... I'm saying that now, but if they didn't get injured and if we qualified and went through because they had good performances, then obviously then I wouldn't be moaning, would I? But it just seems, in hindsight, just such a crazy decision to be putting those players at risk. And to talk about Rob Holding as well, I think we're using him in the wrong position, as we all saw in the Man City game. He's quite clearly a central attacking midfielder with the goal that he scored, which was, to be fair to him, a pretty good finish. I think the only reason he scores that goal is because he's so far out of position of where he should be. He's actually there to be able to score. So there's the benefit of Rob Holding. He's so far out of position, he'll score you goals. That'll be the tagline when we try and sell him on the transfer market.
Yeah, and he's got one more goal than Richarlison has managed all season. So fair play to him on that. But yeah, it sums up Rob Holding, doesn't it? Like, he can't defend, but then somehow just does that. It was good work from Trossard, to be fair. A little weaving run like he does, but it didn't feel like the start of a comeback when that goal went in, to be honest. Just felt like a bit of a consolation, really, didn't it?
Yeah, I feel like it did. I saw quite an interesting little thread on Twitter about some of the reasons why Arsenal may end up missing out this season, if we do actually end up missing out. And I'll just briefly go through them. Some of them we've already talked about as well. The first being the average age is 24.4, which is one of the youngest. The next one is managerial inexperience. Now, I thought this was an interesting one because Arteta's been a massive reason as to why this team has transformed into a tactical masterclass, really. It hasn't it? He's brought so much diversity into his tactics in this team from what we've seen over the last few years. But it does make a good point that he has a stubbornness to diversify from his tactics. So it's like he has a plan and then he doesn't want to change that plan once he's made it. And I kind of agree with that. You know, he has the way that he wants to set up and he doesn't want to change that, even when you're playing against a team that will probably nullify you and better you at that game, like Man City, and also the fact that he doesn't like to change the shape too much in terms of his substitutions. He wants to keep the same shape even if we get an overrun, or you know, we're getting overrun in midfield. He makes silly substitutions sometimes and he brings on a defender, even though he takes off the central attacker midfield and brings on another defender when you get an overrun in the midfield. It just seems crazy. Is that inexperience from the manager as well, which is something that he might learn from? Or do you think Arteta has this stubborn trait that is going to stick with him?
I don't know if I fully agree with that, you know. I think he has got his flaws, but I don't, and he is a stubborn character, no doubt about it. But I like the fact that he's got his pragmatic approach and his tactical decisions are what they are. The team has to play to them. And I know what a lot of people will say is, well, City play a similar way to us, they're of a higher level to us, so when you're going toe-to-toe with them, it does sort of fill you with confidence. But I don't know, I just feel like we have to just build on our game. You know, we're top of the league for a reason, and it's worked to a degree. I don't think the fact that we've dropped points in the last 4 games is really to do with that approach. You know, 9 times out of 10, we would beat Southampton on that day. We just happened to hit that 1 out of 10. And I think a little bit of the pressure's got to us. I think the defensive aspect to our game has just massively dropped off, and that is to do with a bit of Saliba, but it's also to do with many other aspects. I don't think. I think he's right to stick with his approach because it's worked ultimately. I think where his stubbornness lets him down. Actually, it's not even stubbornness. I just think his tactical awareness in game can sometimes be poor. I think his substitutions can sometimes be poor, but ultimately he hasn't always got the tools to be able to do what he probably wanted to do. And this is why I was talking about getting a bigger centre forward, for example, allowing us to have something else to do, having a Xhaka replacement in the team, because we don't really have anyone that can play in Xhaka's position. We're putting Vieira there, who's rubbish. Smith Rowe, we've never really played him there. We're putting Trossard's played there in recent games. We're playing players out of position. So he ultimately hasn't got the tools like a City would have. But sometimes I think he does lack with in-game management.
Oh yeah, for sure. And when you're talking about the lack of tools and things like that, when you compare it to the Manchester City team, you know, they're able to bring off the likes of let's just get up here. Bring off Grealish, Gundogan, and Kevin De Bruyne, and then they can bring on Mahrez, Foden, and Alvarez. You know, it doesn't really drop the quality of the team at all, does it? It's almost like for liking quality wise. And then if we're looking to swap our players, we're taking off the likes of Martinelli for, well, Trossard's been pretty decent, but you'd want to keep them both on the pitch if you could. But if you're going to swap Odegaard, you've got to bring on Vieira, and that's a massive dip in quality. Saka, you've got Reece Nelson, who's had that one big moment, but apart from that, he's not been awful, but he's been nowhere near the quality that Saka is. And then Jesus for Nketiah. What is that about? That is a huge drop off in quality, and it's almost like if Plan A isn't working for this Arsenal team, then we've got nothing else. We have got no Plan B. And even when Plan A has been working, we've managed to mess it up after we've been 2 goals up. And that's because of our defence, you know, is being quite inconsistent recently. So it is frustrating. And I just don't really know where to go from here to talk about this Arsenal team. It's just... I've had so much praise for them over this year. So much praise, and they've done me so proud. Done all Arsenal fans. They've got us up off our seats on quite a lot of different weekends and moments and opportunities and last minute winners, etc. And I think it's just because when you finally get that hope that you're gonna achieve something that we haven't for so many years, and then for it to just start to crumble in front of your eyes, it really does hurt. It's quite painful, and I think we're partly to blame, actually, Dave, me and you, because we've got this curse, and I think it's time that we actually tell our listeners about the curse of the pub. There's a pub in Lincoln, and it's called the Nosy Parker, right? And every time me and Dave have watched an Arsenal match there, they haven't won. And sorry to tell the listeners about this, but we actually ended up watching the West Ham game and the Man City game there this season, and we all know what happened there. But we also last season watched the Tottenham game there, didn't we? It's a bit of a cursed pub, and I don't know why we keep doing it to ourselves and doing it to the Arsenal team.
I think we'll have to just find a new pub, to be honest. But, yeah, it is disappointing, like you say. But I've never really. I was too young to remember the title in 03-04, so I didn't really experience it then. But even if we fall short, to be in a title race, it's been great. You know, like it's been stressful. Don't get me wrong, but the fact that we're here now is great, isn't it? And I keep saying it, but I do think we're going to be here and challenging for more than just this season. Obviously, I think it's years to come that we'll be pushing as much as we can do. So yeah, I think we've got to hold our heads up high and be proud of what this young team have achieved this year, even if we do fall short.
Yeah, I think you're completely right there. And I just want to say, is there anything else you want to add from today's game at all? I think what I'd like to say is, with all of the disappointment that we've had recently, that we need to keep our heads held up high, because we have done so well in this season, and there's still a few games to go. But we have disappointed days, but we have disappointed days together. And yeah, we'll get through it. It just definitely sounds like we're doing a therapy session, doesn't it? We're going to get through it. It's like a breakup almost. But yeah, it's tricky. But we'll move on, and we'll move on to the next game, won't we?
Yeah, it has been a bit like therapy, but to be honest, it's been tough doing these podcasts the last 4 games, hasn't it? Normally I wanted to jump on straight away and talk about it, but this one especially, this is why we're probably a bit later than normal. I'm not looking forward to this at all, to talk about it. I've avoided seeing anything on social media just to try and forget about it almost. But yeah, that's been a bit like therapy. We've got to try and look at the silver linings in things, haven't we? But I did have one more thing that I wanted to talk about. Just for the upcoming game against Chelsea, we've sort of touched on it a little bit with the Trossard talk. But as I mentioned earlier, how influential he was when he first came into this team, and since he's not been playing as many minutes at these last 4 games, coincidentally the games we've not really done very well in, do you think it's about time he got a chance from the start against Chelsea? And if so, who would he replace in the team, do you think?
Yeah, I think he does deserve a start, to be honest. And for me, it might be controversial, but I would actually take Jesus out, just because he really didn't offer much in that last game. And I think he deserves a bit of a rest as well, because since he's come back from that long-term injury, we've just, used him as much as we physically possibly can. And I think he just needs a bit of a rest. Maybe come off the bench later on in the game, try and make an impact from there. But I think, having Saka, Trossard and Martinelli with Odegaard in behind would be a really decent outfit to have against that Chelsea team. So yeah, that's what I would do personally. Would you do the same, or would you swap him for someone else?
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? Because Martinelli's been great in recent games, but this game, well, the whole front three were anonymous, to be honest, so it's hard to pick one out. But I do think Trossard works best from the left. So it definitely would either be Martinelli or Jesus, for sure. The one thing that I'm thinking is who's better to bring off the bench, who provides more threat and running at tired legs. And Martinelli for me is that sort of guy. The way when you bring him on, it's quite scary for defenders. But yeah, it's tough. To be honest, either way, I'm pretty happy if he starts ahead of Jesus or Martinelli. But I think it's time to get him back in the team from a starting position and give him more minutes to show what he can do, because he shows glimpses when he comes on in games, but it just hasn't got enough to really provide that proper impact. He was the one that created that goal that Haaland scored, to be fair. So what could he be contributing if he has a start?
Yeah, that is true, and he's been one of our best players since he's actually come into the team. Unsurprising, really, because when he was at Brighton, he was a fantastic player. So I don't know if that is something as well which we might have messed up in with this Man City game, just because of the amount of experience and him being a little bit older as well that he brings to the team. He might have been better to be able to have in this game. But as we saw, to be honest, the front three didn't have anything to even feed off, and they weren't even in the game at all. So it might have been a bit of a null point, to be fair. But yeah, I think we should probably leave it at that for the Man City game and put this behind us so that we can look forward to the future and hopefully get 3 points against Chelsea. And also, fingers crossed, before we play that game, Man City might get absolutely destroyed away from home at Fulham at Craven Cottage at the weekend. We can only hope, can't we? We can only dream. But until next time, guys, we will catch you Tuesday, I think it will be, just after Bank Holiday. We'll catch you next Tuesday after the Chelsea game.
Okay, guys.